The crate of medical supplies slipped from Ben's hands when the first explosion shook Trading Station Epsilon 7. He barely caught it before thousands of credits worth of equipment scattered across the loading dock. Around him, the usual noise of commerce and transport died instantly, replaced by something he had never heard before: complete silence from thousands of alien voices. Then the screaming started. Ben set down the crate and moved toward the observation window overlooking the main marketplace. Below him, a river of bodies flooded through the corridors. He counted at least 15 different species running in the same direction, away from the Easter docking bays. The Pelions with their 4 arms were grabbing smaller beings and carrying them. The Tower and Grimmeth were actually climbing over each other to escape faster. Whatever they were running from had to be really bad. His communicator crackled to life. All human personnel, evacuate to emergency pods. This is not a drill. Containment breach in Bay 12. Repeat, containment breach. Ben had worked cargo handling on the station for 3 years. He'd seen plenty of dangerous shipments come through. Toxic chemicals, unstable fuel cells, even a case of military weapons that almost started a diplomatic incident. But he had never seen a full evacuation order that he should run. Every logical part of his brain told him to get to the nearest escape pod and let station security handle whatever was happening. Instead, he found himself moving toward Bay 12 that the corridors grew emptier with each step. Emergency lights painted everything red. Blast doors were sealing automatically, and he had to override 2 of them with his cargo handler credentials just to keep moving forward. His heart hammered in his chest, but his feet kept going. He heard the roaring before he saw anything else that was not the sound of machinery or alarms. This was organic, alive, and absolutely furious. The sound resonated in his chest and made his teeth ache. He had heard something similar once, years ago on Earth, when he had accidentally gotten too close to a mother bear protecting her cubs in the mountains near his home. Ben reached the observation platform above Bay 12 and finally saw what had caused an entire space station to panic. The creature was massive, easily 4 meters tall at the shoulder and twice that in length. 6 limbs supported a body covered in scales that looked like polished black stone. Each limb ended in claws the size of combat knives. The head was broad and flat, with rows of teeth visible even from this distance. 2 sets of eyes glowed amber in the emergency lighting. Security forces had surrounded it, at least 40 soldiers in full combat armor. Plasma rifles were aimed at the creature from every angle. Kinetic barriers shimmered in the air, forming a cage of energy around the beast. But Ben noticed something the soldiers apparently did not. The creature was not attacking. It was cornered, sure, and making threatening noises, but it had not actually moved toward any of the security forces. One of its rear legs was held at an odd angle, and dark blood dripped onto the deck, plating beneath it. Varathian Shadow Stalker, someone said behind him. Ben turned to find Grish, the station commander, standing with 4 arms crossed over his chest. The Pelion skin had paled to almost white, a sign of serious fear in his species. "What is that?" Ben asked. "Death on 6 legs," Grish said. "Bred for combat arenas on the outer colonies. One of those things killed 17 soldiers on Outpost Tharsis before they brought it down. And that was a juvenile. This one is fully grown. Why is it here? Black market transport. The idiots who were smuggling it crashed their ship during docking." The containment unit broke open. Grish's translator device made his voice sound tired. "We're going to have to kill it. There is no other option." Ben looked back at the creature. It had lowered itself slightly, still growling, but the posture was wrong for an attack. The injured leg was tucked close to its body. The head movements were tracking the soldiers, but in a defensive pattern, watching for threats rather than selecting targets. "It is scared," Ben said quietly. "It is a killing machine," Grish corrected. "Those things do not feel fear. They feel hunger and rage and nothing else." "Then why has it not attacked yet? You have 40 guns pointed at it, and it has not tried to kill anyone." Grish's 4 eyes blinked in sequence. "Because we have it contained. The moment those barriers drop, it will slaughter everyone in that bay." Ben studied the creature for another long moment. The way it held its weight, the way its eyes kept darting to potential escape routes rather than targets. the way it kept its injured leg protected. He had grown up around animals on Earth. His family had lived in the mountains, where knowing how to read a predator's body language was the difference between life and death. This was not a mindless killer. This was a hurt, terrified animal that had been ripped from its cage and thrown into a nightmare of noise and threatening strangers. "I want to go down there," Ben said. Grish's skin went completely white. "You are insane." "Maybe, but I do not think it wants to fight. It is a Varathian shadow stalker. Fighting is what it was designed to do." Ben shook his head. Designed by who? For what? It did not ask to be created as a weapon. Before Grish could stop him, Ben moved toward the stairwell that led down to the bay floor. His hands were shaking, but his steps were steady. He had no idea if this would work. He just knew that watching them execute a scared animal was not something he could live with. The creature's eyes found him the moment he emerged onto the bay floor, and for the first time since the containment breach, the shadow stalker went completely silent. Every weapon in the bay swung toward Ben the moment he stepped past the security line. He heard Grish shouting over the communicator, ordering him to stop, but Ben pulled the device from his ear and let it clatter to the deck. The soldiers were yelling too, their voices distorted through helmet speakers, but he tuned them out. The only thing that mattered was the creature watching him from 30 meters away. Ben raised his hands slowly, palms forward, showing he carried nothing. The shadow stalker's massive head tilted slightly to one side. Those amber eyes tracked every tiny movement he made. The growling had stopped completely, replaced by an eerie silence that somehow felt more dangerous. He took one step forward, then another. The soldiers were practically screaming now. Someone was yelling about firing solutions and kill zones. Ben ignored all of it. He had committed to this path the moment he entered the bay, and second-guessing himself now would only make things worse. 5 steps. 10. 15. The creature's muscles bunched under those obsidian scales. Its claws scraped against the metal deck. Every predator instinct it possessed was probably telling it to strike, to eliminate the threat approaching its position. But it did not move. 20 steps. Ben could see the individual teeth now, each one the length of his finger. He could see the rise and fall of the creature's chest as it breathed. He could see the wound on its rear leg more clearly now, a gash that had to be painful, maybe even infected. He sat down. The action was so unexpected that even the soldiers went quiet for a moment. Ben simply lowered himself to the deck plating, crossing his legs, making himself as small and non-threatening as possible. He was now less than 15 meters from a creature that could cover that distance in under 2 seconds and rip him apart before anyone could react. The shadow stalker's head tilted the other way, almost like a confused dog. Clearly, prey did not usually behave this way. Ben reached slowly into his work vest and pulled out his lunch rations. The movement made every soldier tense, fingers on triggers, but he just opened the sealed container and took out half of a sandwich. He took a bite, chewed slowly, and swallowed. Then he broke off a piece and set it on the deck in front of him. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said quietly. His voice sounded too loud in the silent bay. "I know you were scared. I know you were hurt. I just want to help." The creature made a sound, something between a growl and a rumble that Ben felt in his bones. But it was not an aggressive sound. It was questioning, uncertain. Ben took another bite of his sandwich and waited. Time stretched out. His legs started to cramp from sitting still. Sweat ran down his back despite the climate control. Behind him, he heard Grish giving orders in a hushed voice, probably setting up backup plans in case this went horribly wrong. The shadow stalker shifted its weight. The injured leg moved slightly, and Ben saw the creature flinch. That wound was definitely causing serious pain. No wonder it had been so aggressive when it first escaped. Pain made everything worse, made fear turn into violence. One of the creature's front limbs extended forward. Then another. It was moving toward him, slowly, each step deliberate. Ben forced himself to remain still. Every muscle in his body wanted to run, but he knew that running would trigger the chase instinct. Predators chase things that ran. It was hardwired into them. 10 meters away. 8. Six, that the shadow stalker lowered its head until that massive skull was level with Ben's. He could feel hot breath washing over him, could smell something like copper and ozone. Those amber eyes were less than 2 meters from his face, studying him with an intelligence that most people probably never saw in arena footage. Ben slowly extended his hand with a piece of sandwich. It is not much, but you look like you could use a friend. The creature's nostrils flared, scenting the food. Then it did something Ben had not expected. It ignored the food completely and instead moved its head closer to him, sniffing at his chest, his neck, his hair. It was smelling him, learning his scent, trying to figure out what he was. Ben remained perfectly still and let it happen. After what felt like an hour but was probably only 30 seconds, the shadow stalker pulled back slightly. It looked at him for another long moment, then at the piece of sandwich in his hand, then back at his face. Very carefully, moving with surprising delicacy for something so massive, it extended its tongue and took the food from his palm. Ben heard someone gasp over the communicators. He heard Grish muttering what had to be prayers in his native language. The creature chewed once, swallowed, and then lowered itself to the deck. The movement was gradual, controlled, until that enormous body was lying down with its head resting just a meter from where Ben's IT hurt to move, but Ben shifted slowly until he was kneeling beside the injured leg. The creature watched him, but did not pull away. Up close, the wound looked worse than he had thought. The edges were inflamed, and there was definitely infection starting. This thing must have been in agony for hours, maybe days. "Can I look at this?" Ben asked, keeping his voice soft. "I have some supplies in my vest. Nothing fancy, but better than nothing." The shadow stalker rumbled again. That same questioning sound. Ben took it as permission. He opened his emergency medical kit, the one every cargo handler carried in case of industrial accidents. His hands shook as he pulled out antiseptic wipes and bandage rolls. "This might sting a bit," he warned, and began to clean the wound. The creature tensed but did not pull away. As Ben worked, he started talking, filling the silence with the story of how he had ended up working on a space station, about his home in the mountains, about the animals he had known growing up. His voice seemed to calm the shadow stalker, and by the time he finished bandaging the wound, that massive head had drooped until it was nearly touching his knee. Ben looked up and found every soldier in the bay staring at them in complete disbelief. The galaxy's deadliest predator had just let a human treat its wounds. The footage went viral across 17 star systems in less than 6 hours. Ben did not know about any of that at first. He was too busy sitting in a medical observation room while 3 different doctors argued about whether he needed psychiatric evaluation. Through the reinforced window, he could see the shadow stalker in the converted cargo bay that now served as its temporary holding facility. The creature was sedated, finally getting proper treatment for its infected wound, but even unconscious, it had refused to let anyone near except Ben. Grish entered the room, his 4 arms full of data pads. The Pelian commander looked like he had not slept in days, which was probably true. "You are famous," Grish announced, dropping into a chair that creaked under his weight. "Galactic News Network is calling you the Death Worlder who tamed the untamable. They've been playing the security footage on loop." "I did not tame anything," Ben said. "I just was not threatening. You sat down in front of a Varathian shadow stalker and fed it your lunch. Every xenobiologist in known space is losing their minds trying to understand how you survive." Grish pulled up a datapad and started reading. "Dr. Reneth from the Collegium wants to study you. Professor Yalith is writing papers about human empathy as a survival trait. Someone started a betting pool about whether you were secretly a trained animal handler or just insane. Neither. I grew up around animals. You learn to read them or you get hurt. It is that simple." Grish's translator made a sound that might have been a laugh or a sigh. "Nothing about this is simple. Do you know what that creature is worth? 2 million credits on the black market. 5 million if it survives long enough to win arena championships. You just created a diplomatic nightmare." "What do you mean?" "The owner wants it back. A crime boss named Horval from the outer colonies. He has lawyers, guns, and enough political connections to make my life very difficult." Grish set down the datapad and rubbed his face with all 4 hands. Galactic law considers creatures like the Shadow Stalker as property. Horval has documentation proving he owns it. We have to give it back. Ben stood up so fast his chair fell over. You cannot be serious. That thing will go right back to fighting pits. They will use pain collars and starvation to make it aggressive. It will spend the rest of its life killing other creatures for entertainment. I know, but I do not make the laws. I just enforce them. Then the laws are wrong. Grish looked at him with all four eyes. You sound like a human. Everything is so simple for your species. Right and wrong, black and white. The rest of us learned long ago that the galaxy is more complicated. This is not complicated. That creature does not want to fight. It wants to be left alone. Did you see it attack anyone after I sat down? Did it try to hurt me even once? No, which is why every scientist in 3 sectors wants to understand what you did. Grish stood and moved to the window overlooking the cargo bay. The problem is that understanding something does not change the law. Horval will be here in 2 days. He will take the Shadow Stalker, and there is nothing we can do about it. Ben stared through the window at the sleeping creature. Even sedated, it looked dangerous. Those claws, those teeth, that powerful body built for violence. But he remembered the intelligence in those amber eyes, the way it had chosen trust over aggression, the way it had let him help despite every instinct telling it not to. I am not going to let that happen, Ben said. You do not have a choice. There is always a choice. Grish turned to face him. What are you going to do? Steal a Vorathian Shadow Stalker and run? Where would you go? How would you feed it? How would you keep it safe? I do not know yet, but I will think of something. The next 3 days were the strangest of Ben's life. He spent every free moment with the creature, which the medical staff had started calling Subject 47, because apparently they were not creative enough to give it a real name. Ben called it Ash, after the volcanic ash fields near his childhood home. The name seemed to fit. Ash healed quickly once the infection was treated. The sedatives were reduced gradually, and soon the creature was awake and alert. It never tried to attack anyone, but it also never let anyone except Ben get close. The xenobiologists set up cameras and ran every test they could think of, always from behind reinforced barriers. Ben brought food 3 times a day and sat with Ash while it ate. He talked about everything and nothing, his voice becoming a familiar comfort to the creature. Sometimes Ash would rest its massive head near him, and Ben would run his hand over those obsidian scales, marveling at how something so dangerous could choose to be so gentle like a teen-knight. Ben researched galactic law on his personal terminal. He read through centuries of legal precedent about property rights, animal welfare, and sentient being classifications. Most of it was dense and boring, written by bureaucrats who had probably never seen a living creature in their lives. But then he found something interesting that IT was an old law written before the Galactic Council had standardized most legal codes. A law that said any creature capable of forming a genuine bond with a sentient being could petition for refugee status. The law had been written for a different purpose, to protect diplomatic animals and companion species, but the wording was broad enough that it might apply to Ash. The key word was genuine bond. Ben would have to prove that Ash had chosen him, not just been tamed or trained or coerced. He would have to prove that their connection was real. He looked through the window at Ash, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. The creature made a soft, rumbling sound, the same questioning tone it had used in the bay. I'm going to try something really stupid, Ben told it, and it probably will not work. But I have to try. Ash tilted its massive head and rumbled again. Ben chose to believe it was encouragement. The next morning, he filed paperwork with the station's judicial office. By noon, every news network in the sector had picked up the story that a human was challenging a crime boss for custody of the galaxy's deadliest predator. Horval arrived on Trading Station Epsilon, 7 exactly 48 hours later, and he did not come alone. Ben watched from the observation deck as the crime boss's ship docked. It was massive, easily 3 times the size of a normal transport, with weapons systems that were barely legal in neutral space. A small army of enforcers poured out, all carrying visible weapons and wearing armor that marked them as professionals. Horval himself was a Krenthi, a species known for their business sense and complete lack of empathy. He stood nearly 3 meters tall, with gray skin stretched over too much muscle and small black eyes that calculated the value of everything they saw. His clothes probably cost more than Ben made in a year. He looks friendly, Ben muttered. Grish stood beside him, looking even more tired than before. Horval owns half the illegal fighting rings in the outer colonies. He has enough money to buy this station twice over and enough lawyers to make sure he never sees the inside of a prison. You are picking a fight with someone who eats people like you for breakfast. I'm not trying to fight him. I'm trying to save Ash. The Shadow Stalker is property. You do not get to save property. We will see what the judge says. The hearing was scheduled for that afternoon in the station's main judicial chamber. Ben had never been inside before. It was a circular room with seats arranged in ascending tiers, designed so that representatives from multiple species could observe proceedings. Today, every seat was filled. News crews from a dozen networks had set up cameras. Scientists, lawyers, traders, and curious citizens packed the space until fire safety became a genuine concern. Ben sat at one table with a court-appointed lawyer who looked barely old enough to have graduated law school. Horval sat at another table with a team of 6 lawyers, all wearing expensive suits and expressions of complete confidence. The judge was a Vroth, an ancient species known for their fairness and inability to be bribed. She entered through a side door, her crystalline body refracting the chamber lights into rainbow patterns. When she spoke, her voice came from everywhere at once. This court recognizes the petition filed by human Ben Garrett regarding the Varathian Shadow Stalker currently held on this station. Mr. Horval, you claim ownership? Horval stood, dwarfing everyone around him. I do, Your Honor. I have documentation proving purchase and transport. The creature is valuable property that was being legally transported when criminals damaged my ship and caused this entire mess. I am the victim here. Mr. Garrett, you claim the creature should be granted refugee status. Ben stood on shaky legs. Public speaking had never been his strength. I do, Your Honor. The law says that any creature capable of forming a genuine bond with a sentient being can petition for protected status. Ash chose to trust me instead of attacking. That has to count for something. One of Horval's lawyers stood immediately. Objection, Your Honor. The creature has no name. It is designated as Subject 47 in all official documentation. Mr. Garrett's emotional attachment does not override property law. The creature has a name, Ben said firmly. I named it Ash, and it is not just emotional attachment. Ash is intelligent. It makes choices. It understands trust and fear and pain. Those are not properties of an object. They are properties of a well-trained animal, the lawyer countered. My client has invested millions of credits into breeding programs that produce creatures capable of following complex commands. Intelligence does not equal personhood. The judge raised one crystalline hand, and everyone went silent. This court will hear testimony and evidence before making a determination. Mr. Horval, present your case. What followed was 2 hours of the most boring legal arguments Ben had ever heard. Horval's lawyers presented purchase records, genetic engineering patents, transport manifests, and arena fight statistics. They brought up legal precedent from dozens of cases about animal ownership. They quoted laws that were older than some of the species in the chamber. Their basic argument was simple. Horval had bought the Shadow Stalker. He had documentation, and therefore it was his property. End of discussion. Ben's lawyer tried to argue back, but he was clearly outmatched. He stumbled over legal terminology and got shut down by objections every few minutes. By the time he finished, Ben knew they were losing. Mr. Garrett, the judge said, "Do you have anything to add?" Ben stood again. He had not prepared a speech. He had no legal training. All he had was the truth. Your Honor, I am just a cargo handler. I do not know much about galactic law or property rights, but I know what I saw in that bay. Ash was hurt and scared and surrounded by people who wanted to kill it. It could have attacked. It was designed to attack, but it did not. It chose something different. It chose to follow survival instincts. One of Horval's lawyers interrupted. Attacking would have resulted in its death. No, Ben said. Attacking would have killed at least a dozen people before they brought it down. Ash knew that, but it also knew that I was not a threat. It read my body language, understood my intentions, and made a choice to trust instead of fight. That is not programming. That is intelligence. Trained behavior, the lawyer insisted. Then explain why it only trusts me. Your client had that creature for how long? Months? Years? If it was trained to trust its owner, it should trust Horval. But it does not. The medical staff tried to approach it, and it growled at them. Security tried to move it, and it snapped at them. The only person it accepts is me. Why? Because I showed it kindness when everyone else showed it violence. The chamber was completely silent. Your Honor, Ben continued, I'm not asking for money or fame or anything except for Ash to have a choice. Bring it here. Put me in a room with Horval. Let Ash decide who it wants to be with. If it chooses Horval, I will walk away. But if it chooses me, then you have to admit there's a real bond here. And that bond should mean something. Horval stood abruptly. Absolutely not. I will not subject my property to some theatrical demonstration. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her voice carried the weight of centuries of legal tradition. This court accepts Mr. Garrett's proposal. The creature will be brought to a secure chamber. Both parties will be present. We will observe its behavior and make a final ruling based on what we see. This hearing is adjourned until tomorrow morning. Ben sat down, his legs suddenly weak. Grish appeared beside him and placed a hand on his shoulder. That was either very brave or very stupid, the commander said. Probably both, Ben admitted. Ben did not sleep that night. He sat in the observation room, watching Ash pace the converted cargo bay. The creature seemed to sense something was wrong. It kept looking toward the door, then back at the window where Ben sat, those amber eyes full of questions Ben could not answer. I am sorry, Ben whispered to the glass. I know this is scary, but it is the only way. Grish found him there at dawn, still sitting in the same chair. The Pelion brought 2 cups of something hot that smelled like burned rubber, but probably passed for coffee in some part of the galaxy. You should eat, Grish said, offering one of the cups. Not hungry. You should eat anyway. You're going to need your strength. Ben took the cup, but did not drink. What if I am wrong? What if Ash does not choose me? What if it is just an animal after all, and I have been projecting human emotions onto something that does not feel them? Then you tried. That counts for something, does it? If Ash goes back to those fighting pits, if it spends the rest of its life in pain and fear, does trying count for anything? Grish settled into a chair, all 4 arms wrapped around his own cup. You know what I have learned in my years running this station? Most people do not try. They see injustice and they look away because it is easier. They tell themselves that one person cannot make a difference, that the system is too big to fight. You did not do that. You saw a creature in pain and you helped it, even though it could have killed you, even though it made no logical sense. That is what humans do, apparently. You make the illogical choice because you think it is right. And look where it got me. About to hand Ash over to someone who will hurt it. You have not lost yet. The hearing chamber was even more crowded than the day before. Word had spread across the station and beyond. Ben recognized reporters from networks he had only heard about, scientists whose names he knew from research papers, even a few diplomatic representatives from various species governments. Everyone wanted to see what would happen when a human faced off against a crime boss over the fate of a predator. The judge entered and called the chamber to order. The creature will be brought to the secure testing room. Mr. Garrett and Mr. Horval will enter separately. All observers will remain behind reinforced barriers. This court reminds everyone that Varathian shadow stalkers are extremely dangerous. Medical teams are standing by. Ben's heart hammered as he followed a guard toward the testing room. It was a large chamber, maybe 20 meters across, with walls of transparent reinforced material on all sides so observers could watch safely. The floor was bare metal, and the lighting was bright enough to eliminate shadows. Ash was already there, pacing in circles, clearly agitated. Heavy restraints were still attached to its legs, and a muzzle covered its jaws. The creature looked miserable. Why is it restrained? Ben demanded. Safety protocol, the guard said. They will remove the restraints once both parties are present. Horval entered from the opposite door, flanked by two of his enforcers. The crime boss smiled when he saw Ash, the expression predatory and possessive. He pulled a small device from his pocket, something that looked like a remote control. Ben felt his stomach drop. "What is that?" "Insurance," Horval said. "A pain collar, installed in the creature's hide during transport. Standard procedure for dangerous cargo. If it misbehaves, I press a button and it learns to obey. That is torture. That is training." Horval's smile widened. "Watch." He pressed the button. Ash convulsed. All 6 legs going rigid as electricity coursed through its body. The creature tried to roar, but the muzzle muffled the sound into something horrible and broken. It collapsed onto the deck, muscles spasming, eyes rolling back. Ben rushed forward without thinking. Guards tried to stop him, but he pushed past them and ran to Ash's side. "Stop it! You are killing it!" Horval held the button for another 3 seconds, then released it. Ash went limp, breathing hard, trembling all over. "You see," Horval said calmly, "it obeys because it knows the consequences. That is what discipline looks like human, something your soft species never understood." Ben knelt beside Ash, hands hovering over the creature's heaving flanks. "I am so sorry. I am so sorry." Ash's eyes found his, and Ben saw something in them he had never seen before. Not fear, not pain, understanding. The creature knew this was not Ben's fault. It knew Ben was trying to help. "Remove the restraints," the judge ordered. "We will proceed with the test." Guards moved in with tools, cutting away the muzzle and releasing the leg restraints. Ash stood slowly, still shaking from the shock. It towered over Ben, could have crushed him easily in its current state of pain and rage. Instead, it pressed its massive head against Ben's chest, the closest thing to a hug a 6-limbed predator could manage. The chamber erupted in shocked murmurs. Cameras flashed. Ben wrapped his arms around Ash's neck as far as they would reach. "Choose me," he whispered. "Please choose me." Horval activated the pain collar again. Ash screamed, that awful muffled sound tearing through the chamber. The creature's legs buckled, but it did not pull away from Ben. It stayed pressed against him, seeking comfort even as electricity burned through its nervous system. "Turn it off," Ben shouted. "You are going to kill it. You need to remember who owns it," Horval said, still holding the button down. Something inside Ben snapped. He had never been a violent person. Growing up in the mountains, his father had taught him that violence was always the last option, only acceptable when protecting something you loved. He loved Ash. He knew that now with absolute certainty. Ben charged across the chamber toward Horval. The enforcers moved to intercept, but Ben was faster than they expected. He slammed into Horval with his full weight, knocking the larger alien backward. The remote clattered across the floor. Grish appeared from somewhere, moving faster than Ben had ever seen the commander move. The Pelion grabbed the remote with one hand and crushed it with another, the device sparking and dying. The pain collar went silent. Ash collapsed onto the deck, gasping for air. Ben scrambled back to the creature's side, checking for injuries, whispering apologies. The judge's voice cut through the chaos like a blade. "Mr. Horval, this court finds your treatment of the creature to be unnecessarily cruel. However, we still must complete the test. The restraints are removed. Both parties are present. We will now observe which one the creature approaches." Horval stood, brushing off his expensive clothes. "Fine. It will come to me anyway. It knows better than to disobey." Ben stood between Horval and Ash. "If it goes to you, I will not stop it. But you do not get to hurt it anymore. We shall see." The chamber went silent. Everyone watching held their breath. Ash rose slowly to its full height, still shaking but standing steady. It looked at Horval, then it looked at Ben, and then the galaxy's deadliest predator made its choice. Ash turned away from Horval and walked directly to Ben. The creature moved slowly, deliberately, each step a clear statement of intent. When it reached Ben, it lowered itself to the deck and placed its massive head in Ben's lap, the same way it had done that first day in the cargo bay. The chamber exploded with noise. Reporters shouted questions. Scientists argued with each other. Horrible's lawyers immediately started filing objections. But none of it mattered because everyone in that room had seen the same thing. The shadow stalker had chosen. The judge raised her crystalline hands, and silence gradually returned. This court has observed sufficient evidence of a genuine bond between Mr. Garrett and the creature. However, before making a final ruling, I must address additional matters that have come to light. She gestured, and a screen appeared showing security footage. It displayed Horrible's transport ship, specifically the cargo hold where Ash had been kept. The conditions were horrific. A cage barely large enough for the creature to turn around. No padding, no comfort, just bare metal and automated feeding systems. Scorch marks on the walls showed where the pain collar had been used repeatedly. Mr. Horrible, the judge said, her voice cold. This court has reviewed your transport methods. They violate at least 17 different animal welfare statutes, even for non-sentient cargo. You have also used restricted pain compliance technology without proper authorization. Galactic law may recognize creatures as property, but it also requires humane treatment. Horrible's lawyers jumped to their feet. Your Honor, those regulations are guidelines, not requirements. My client has broken no laws. Your client has violated the ethical transport standards agreed upon by the Galactic Council. Additionally, station security has informed me that your ship's docking credentials were falsified, your cargo manifests were incomplete, and you have outstanding warrants in 3 different systems for illegal animal smuggling. Horrible's gray skin paled slightly. Those are minor administrative issues. They are crimes, and they change the nature of your ownership claim. The judge turned to Ben. Mr. Garrett, this court recognizes that the creature known as Ash has formed a genuine bond with you. Under the old refugee laws, this would grant Ash protected status. However, those laws have not been invoked in over 200 years, and there are complications. Ben's heart sank. He had known it was too good to be true. The primary complication, the judge continued, is that Ash is still considered a dangerous predator. Granting refugee status would require extensive testing, behavioral monitoring, and proof that public safety can be maintained. This process typically takes years. I will do whatever it takes, Ben said immediately. There is an alternative option. Mr. Horrible's legal claim to Ash is now questionable given the criminal activity associated with the transport. This court could declare the creature as seized property and place it in protective custody while legal matters are resolved. However, seized property typically goes to government facilities, which in this case would mean a containment unit designed for dangerous organisms. Ash would spend years in a cage while bureaucrats argued about its fate. Ben looked down at Ash, who was watching him with those intelligent amber eyes. The thought of this creature locked in another cage made him feel sick. There is a third option, the judge said. If someone were willing to take full legal and financial responsibility for Ash to ensure proper care and public safety, this court could grant conditional custody. That person would essentially be adopting Ash, accepting all risks and obligations. If Ash ever harmed anyone, that person would face criminal charges. It is a significant burden. I will do it, Ben said without hesitation. I will take full responsibility. Mr. Garrett, do you understand what you are agreeing to? You would need to provide proper housing, food, medical care, and safety measures. You would need to prove you can control Ash in public situations. You would be legally liable for its actions. And you would be doing this on a cargo handler's salary, which I suspect is not designed for exotic animal care. I do not care. I will find a way. I will work extra shifts. I will sell everything I own. Just please do not put Ash in a cage. The judge was quiet for a long moment. Then she spoke, and her tone had softened slightly. This court grants conditional custody of the creature known as Ash to Ben Garrett. Mr. Horrible, your ownership claim is suspended pending investigation into your criminal activities. Mr. Garrett, you will meet with station administration to establish safety protocols and care requirements. This ruling is final. The gavel came down, and just like that, it was over. Horrible tried to appeal, but station security was already moving toward him with arrest warrants. His lawyers scattered. His enforcers suddenly found reasons to be elsewhere. The crime boss who had arrived with such confidence was led away in restraints, shouting threats that everyone knew were empty. Ben just sat on the floor with Ash's head still in his lap, unable to quite believe what had just happened. Grish appeared beside them, all four arms crossed but a smile on his face. Congratulations. You now own the galaxy's most expensive pet. I cannot afford this, Ben said, the reality starting to sink in. I have no idea how I am going to feed something this size, or where we are going to live, or how to pay for medical care. I just agreed to something impossible. Yes, you did. Very human of you. Grish pulled out a datapad. Fortunately, you have help. The scientific community has agreed to fund Ash's care in exchange for research access. Several news networks want to do documentaries, which comes with payment. And the station council has voted to create a new position, interspecies relations specialist. The job comes with a significant raise and housing accommodations large enough for both you and Ash. Why would they do that? Because you did something no one thought was possible. You proved that creatures bred for violence can choose peace if given the chance. You showed that bonds can form between species that should be enemies. And you did it by being kind when everyone else chose fear. Grish offered one hand to help Ben up. The galaxy noticed. Now, they want to see what else humans can do. Ben stood, and Ash rose beside him, stretching all 6 limbs. The creature looked different somehow, lighter, as if a weight had been lifted. It probably had been. Freedom weighed less than chains. What do we do now? Ben asked. Now you go home. You and Ash figure out this new life together. And maybe, if you're very lucky, you change the galaxy a little bit in the process. 3 months later, Ben stood in the cargo bay that had been converted into living quarters. It was not fancy, but it was comfortable. Ash had a large space to sleep, proper feeding schedules, and regular medical checkups. The creature had adapted well to station life, and people had adapted to it. Children no longer screamed when they saw Ash in the corridors. Instead, they asked if they could pet the big creature, and Ash would lower its head and rumble contentedly. The documentary about their story had won awards. The research papers had started important conversations about sentient rights. And most importantly, other creatures in fighting rings across the colonies were being freed and given second chances. Ben sat on a crate, watching ships come and go through the viewport. Ash lay beside him, that massive head resting near his feet. Outside, the galaxy turned full of possibility and wonder. You know what the funny thing is? Ben said to Ash, everyone thinks I saved you. But really, you saved me. Before we met, I was just going through the motions. Now, I have a purpose. Ash rumbled, that questioning sound that Ben had learned meant contentment. Yeah, Ben agreed. Home. And for the first time in his life, he truly meant it.